Okay, today we are going to talk about word problems that need to be solved by factoring. Okay, when you see that word solve, that means that these are going to have an equal sign, and we're going to be looking for solutions. We're not going to just be looking for factors. We're going to be looking for the actual solutions. Okay, so let's get started here. Number one, the sum of a number and its square is 12. What is the number? Okay, so we don't know what the number is. Okay, and if we don't know something in algebra, we put in x. So I'm going to call the number x, and then I'm going to go back to the beginning of the problem. So it says the sum of a number, so the sum, that's plus, of a number x, and its square. So it that it is talking about here, that's x. So if I want its square, that would be x squared, is, so we should know by now that that word is means equals and then 12. So if I put this all together, that would be x plus x squared equals 12. Okay, now we talked about in quadratic formula that before we factor that we need to get it in standard form. Okay, which means we need to move the 12. So I'm going to subtract 12. And when I rewrite it, I'm going to rewrite it with my x squared term first. So I'm going to have x squared plus x minus 12 equals to 0. Okay, and now it is set up for me to factor. So first I look for a GCF, and there is no GCF. Then I start factoring. So I'm going to multiply a and c. Okay, that means I need two factors that multiply to be a negative 12, and they have to add to be 1. The two factors that we're going to be looking for here are 4 and negative 3. Okay, and we learned that since we have an a that is equal to 1 right here, then we can do the shortcut. So since it's a positive 4, that's x plus 4. Since it's a negative 3, x minus 3. And this is all still set equal to 0. Now these are just our factors. These are not our solutions. So we have to go on and set each one of these equal to 0 separately. So I will have x plus 4 equal to 0. And x minus 3 equal to 0. Okay, I solve each one of these. On the first problem, I'm going to subtract 4. That gets me x equals negative 4. On the second problem, I add 3. And I get x equals 3. So these are my two solutions. Remember, these can also be called roots. These can be called zeros. And they can also be your x-intercepts. Those all mean the same thing. If I were to take those two numbers and plug them in for these x's, then it would work. Both of these solutions would work in the problem. Okay, number 2. If the sum of a number, so there's sum again, of a number, so that's x, and 5 less than the square of the number. So the square of the number, we just saw that would be x squared, and I need 5 less than that. So that would be x squared minus 5 is, there's that word is again, equals 1. Okay, so we have the sum, so that's x plus x squared minus 5 is equal to 1. Now we can knock out a couple of steps into 1 here. So we can subtract 1. We have to get it equal to 0. And then when I rewrite it, I'm going to go ahead and write it with my x squared term first. So I have x squared plus x, negative 5 minus 1, that's minus 6, is equal to 0. So then I look for a GCF, and there is no GCF. So I'm going to multiply my a and c, which means I need two factors that multiply to be a negative 6 and add to be 1. And those two factors are 3 and negative 2. Okay, so I have my factors. Since I just have a 1 as my a, I can go ahead and do the shortcut. So that's going to give me x plus 3 and x minus 2. But remember, this is not our final answer because these are not our solutions. These are just our factors. So I'm going to take each one of these and set them equal to 0. X plus 3 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. Subtract 3 on the first equation, and we get x equals negative 3. 2 on the second equation, we get x equals 2. And those are our two solutions here. If we were to take those each and plug them in for the x's, then they should both work in the equation. All right, number 3. The length of a rectangle is 2 times the width. The area of the rectangle is 72 square inches. Find the dimensions of the rectangle. All right, so the two things that we have here, we have width and we have length. Okay, we're talking about a rectangle. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. And of that rectangle, we're talking about area. So I need to write that formula. A equals length times width. Okay, and from here, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the sentence. So it says the length is. Length is. There's that word is again. So length equals 2 times, and I'm going to say that width is W. So there's my length. Okay, my width here, we already said right here, is just W. Okay, so now I'm going to take everything that I know from the problem and I'm going to plug it in. Okay, so in this area formula right here, I'm going to plug everything in. So I know my area. My area is 72. My length, I said, was 2W, and my width was W. Okay, I'm going to simplify this. So I've got to multiply these two things first. So I have 72 equals, that's going to be 2W squared. Now to factor this, I have to get it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 72, and I'm just going to move it to the other side, which leaves this now equal to 0. And now I factor this. Okay, first I look for a GCF. And my GCF here is 2. If I factor out a 2, that leaves me with W squared minus 36, still equal to 0. Okay, now I have to factor this binomial. Now, the first question you should ask yourself when you see a binomial is it a difference of squares? And this is. We have a difference. W is squared and 36 is a square. Okay, so this can be broken up into two factors. One's going to be plus, one's going to be minus. W times W gets me W squared. And 6 times 6 gets me 36. I also still have that 2 back out front, but it doesn't matter as much now when we're going to find our solutions. So I take each one of these solutions, and I'm going to set them equal to 0. So I will have W plus 6 equal to 0, and W minus 6 equal to 0. Okay, and when I solve this, I'll subtract 6. So W is negative 6. I'll add 6. So W is 6. Now we have to think about what this problem is actually asking us, because both of these answers might not even make sense in this problem. Okay, so I have to think. I'm talking about measurements, which means I don't want the negative answer. I want the positive answer. Okay, yeah, so yes, both of these are still solutions, but both of these do not work for our example here. Okay, so I'm going to say that my width is 6. That's what W was. Okay, and my length, I'm going to go back up to where I saw what the length was, which is 2 times W. And 2 times W, my width, 2 times 6, that would be 12. Okay, and these problems are super easy to check. So you go back to your rectangle, and I'm going to say that my width is 6, and my length is 12. And if I were to get the area of 6 times 12, that gives me 72 from what the problem told me from the beginning. Okay, number 4. The length of a rectangle. All right, so we have a rectangular garden, and the length of this is 4 more than the width. Okay, so my width, I know from the problem before, my width was just W. And if my length is 4 more than that, then I'm going to say that's W plus 4. Okay, so length is W plus 4. Width, that's just W. And we are talking about area again. So we're going to have area equals length times width. And I'm going to plug in everything that I know to this. So it tells me my area is 60. My length is W plus 4. My width is W. And I'm going to simplify this. So I have 60 equals, I have to distribute this W. I know it looks a little backwards because it's at the end, but you still have to distribute that. So it's W squared plus 4W. Okay, and I'm going to have to factor this, but I have to get it equal to 0 first. So I'll subtract 60, and I'm just going to throw that at the end, which means the left side is now equal to 0. Okay, now I look to see if I have a GCF. I don't have a GCF, so I just start factoring. Multiply my A and C, which means I need two factors that multiply to be a negative 60, and they have to add to be 4. Okay, and those two factors that we are going to want to use are, let's see, they are 6 and 10, but it's going to be a 10 and a negative 6. So those are the two factors that we want. Okay, now since A is just equal to 1, we can go ahead and break this up into a W plus 10 and a W minus 6. And all of that is still equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to take each one, set it equal to 0, and then I'm going to solve each one of these. So subtract 10. So one of our solutions is negative 10. Add 6. And our other solution is W equals 6. Now again, we're talking about measurements. So I don't really care that W is negative 10 because measurements can't be negative. So I want to use the width of 6. So now I know my width is 6. And to get my length, I'm going to look back at what the problem told me. So it said that the length was W plus 4. So if I plug 6 in for W, my length is now 10. Now this is a really easy problem to check since we're talking about area. So if my width is 6, my length is 10, 6 times 10 gets me the area of 60 that it said from the very beginning. Okay. Number 5. The width of a rectangle is 16 inches less than its length. Find the length of the rectangle if the area is 80 square inches. Okay, now we just did a problem exactly like this, so I am going to skip this since we've already done an example very close. Okay, number 6. Now we're dealing with perimeters, so this one's a little bit different. So the perimeter of a rectangle, so we have a rectangle again, is 220 feet. If the width is W and the length is W squared, determine the rectangle's length. All right, so it's saying that the width is W and the length is W squared. And we're talking about perimeter. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write down the formula for perimeter. So perimeter equals 2L plus 2W. Okay, and if you want, you can go ahead and write all the way around this rectangle what each side is. That way it's a little bit easier for you to get the perimeter. Okay, so I'm going to look at my W squareds first. So I have a W squared and a W squared. So that gets me 2W squared. Plus, I have a W and another W, so that's 2W. And it's telling me that my perimeter is 220. Okay? So there's nothing to multiply here. We just need to get the 220 to the other side. And that leaves us with 2W squared plus 2W minus 220 equal to 0. Now this one's a little bit different than the problems we've already worked because we do have a GCF. I can take a 2 out of everything. So take the 2 out. I'm going to write what's left. So w squared plus w minus 110 is equal to 0. Okay, now I factor this, and notice that now we have a 1 in front, so we'll be able to do the shortcut. So I'm going to multiply my a and c, okay, which means I need 2 factors that multiply to be a negative 110, and they have to add to be 1. Okay, so these 2 factors are going to be an 11 and a negative 10. Okay, now since we have that 1 in front, we can go ahead and write our factors as w plus 11 and w minus 10 all equal to 0. Okay, I'm going to break these apart and set them each equal to 0. So I have w plus 11 equals 0 and w minus 10 equal to 0. Now I'm going to solve. So subtract 11. So w equals negative 11. Add 10. So w equals 10. Now what I can do is look at this again, just like the previous problems, and I don't want both of these answers because measurements cannot be negative. So I don't really care that w equals negative 11. I only care that w equals 10. So my width here is 10, and my length, it says, is w squared, which means 10 times 10, which is 100. If I wanted to check this, I could. I'm just going to draw another rectangle, and I know that each width is 10, each length is 100, and if I add up all those sides, then I get a perimeter of 220. Okay, number 7. A billboard is 50 feet longer than it is high. The billboard has 336 square feet of advertising space. What are the measurements of the billboard? Okay, so here it says it's 50 feet longer than it is high. Now these are kind of complicated because it's kind of confusing on if you need to write the length first or the height first. So what I do is I look and see what's first in the sentence, and it says longer, which means that's your length. So my length is 50 more than, so plus the height. And my height, I'm going to say, is still just h. Okay, so basically here, one side is h, the height is, and then the length is 50 plus h. Okay, it's wanting how much space there is here, so that's talking about area. So I have area equals length times width, or in this case, length times height. I'm going to fill in everything that I know. So it says it's 336 square feet. My length is, I'm going to switch this around and do h plus 50, just because it makes more sense to me. And then times height. Okay, and I have to multiply that through, distribute the h. So I have h squared plus 50h. Okay, I need to move my 336 over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract it. That leaves me with 0 over there now. Okay, and I'm actually going to stop here. Okay, but you would go ahead and multiply your a and c, adds up to bb. So multiplies to be negative 336, adds to be 50. Okay, but I'm just going to stop there because you can set the rest of that up on your own. Okay, number 8. A triangle's height is 6 more than its base. If its area is 13.5 square units, determine its height. All right, so we're talking about a triangle. This is the height of a triangle. Okay, I'm going to write down the formula for area of a triangle. Now on the formula chart, it's going to tell you 1/2 base times height, which definitely is true, but I think that base times height divided by 2 is sometimes easier to work with than that 1/2 fraction. Okay, so I'm going to see what it's telling me. It says a triangle's height is is, so height equals 6 more than the base. I'm going to say the base is B. And my base, I just said, was B. If its area is 13.5 square units, determine its height. Okay, so I'm going to plug in everything that I know again into this formula. So my area, it says, is 13.5 equals my base, which is B, times my height, which is B plus 6, divided by 2. Now, there's a couple of different things I need to do here. I'm going to go ahead and distribute the B, and I'll simplify that. So 13.5 equals B squared plus 6B over 2. Okay, now I need to get all of this on the same line together. So I need to get rid of the divided by 2. If I want to undo division, I multiply both sides by 2. That's going to cancel that 2 out. So 2 times 13.5, that gets me 27, equals B squared plus 6B. Okay, I need to get this equal to 0, so I subtract 27, and I'm going to move that to the other side, and that leaves me with 0. Okay, we're going to stop here because you can go on and factor that on your own, but we're going to need to multiply to get a negative 27 and add to get 6. And the last problem. A garden measuring 12 meters by 16 meters is to have a pedestrian pathway installed all around it, increasing the total area to 285 square meters. But what will be the width of the pathway? Okay, so I want to look, and this is where my pathway and my garden is together. So I have to think that this is X and this is X, because I don't know what those are. So this whole side is going to be X plus X, which is 2X, plus 12. And then my whole length is going to be the 16 plus X, so 2X plus 16. Okay, now it's still giving me the area of this rectangle, which is length times width, and I'm going to plug in everything that I know. So I know my area is 285. This is a little bit longer problem, but we should be able to do it. So the length, I'm going to say, is 2X plus 16. My width is 2X plus 12. Okay, now since we have a binomial times a binomial, you either need to use your FOIL or you need to double distribute, however you want to do that. So 2X times 2X, that's 4X squared. 2X times 12, that's 24X. The inside, 16 times 2X, is 32X. And then 16 times 12 is 192. Okay, and this is all still equal to 285. Now I just simplify this. So I have 4X squared plus 56X. And I'm going to go ahead and move this 285 over so I don't have to mess with that. So I have 192 minus 285, and that gets me a minus 93, and all still equal to 0. Now from here, you can factor this. Okay, so you would have to multiply your A and C, adds up to B, because there's no GCF here. Okay, and I'm going to stop there because you should be able to work it from there.